All species fell short. The Deathworlders found it amusing. The chamber was silent in the way that only deep space could produce, a silence so complete it felt like a held breath. 300 delegates from 47 known civilizations had gathered aboard the Concordance Spire, the great diplomatic station orbiting the neutral star of Veluan Prime. The occasion, the Gauntlet of Worthiness. A tradition older than most species' written histories, the Gauntlet was a series of physical, cognitive, and psychological challenges designed by the Conclave's founders to determine which species would hold the seat of the apex representative, the single voice that spoke for all known life in moments of existential crisis. No species had ever completed it. Most didn't even finish the first stage. The Velhari, with their 4 arms and crystalline exoskeletons, typically made it to stage 3 before their homeostasis collapsed under atmospheric pressure variance. The Drenic, towering, methane-breathing giants, could handle stage 1 with ease, but stage 5, the psychological isolation chamber, left them catatonic for weeks. The Siluan dissolved their delegate bodies in stage 2, miscalculating the thermal variance required to survive the heat corridors. The Gauntlet was not designed to be cruel. It was designed to find something worthy. It had simply never found it. Until today, Admiral Kale Vera stood at the observation deck above the main testing floor, his long fingers folded behind his back, his 4 amber eyes tracking the lone figure currently striding through Stage 4's magnetic compression field, the stage that had shattered the bones of 17 other delegates across recorded history. She was walking. Not stumbling. Not crawling. Not seizing. Walking. Delegate Ellison, murmured Counselor Thyrak beside him, a Velhari elder whose voice clicked like cooling glass. She is still upright. Yes, said Vera. The compression field is at 3.4 standard gravities. I'm aware. Thyrak's upper arms crossed over his chest in the gesture his species used for profound discomfort. Our delegate collapsed at 2.1. I know. Below them, Mara Ellison rolled her neck to one side, and even through the observation glass, Vera heard the pop of her vertebrae cracking back into alignment. She didn't grimace. She didn't slow. She pressed 2 fingers against the pressure reader embedded in the wall, verifying the field was active, not malfunctioning, and when the panel blinked green confirming full compression, she let out a short breath through her nose. Then she laughed. It was not a laugh of relief. It was the laugh of someone who had just received an answer they already knew. Mara Ellison had not wanted this assignment. She had told Director Chen as much when he had slid the mission brief across his desk 3 months ago. I'm a field biologist, she had said. I chase extremophiles in deep-crust cave systems. I don't do diplomacy. You do now, Chen had replied. You're the only person on the shortlist who has logged enough environmental stress hours to survive the physical components. The psychological profile requirements are specific. Which requirements? Chen had looked at her for a long moment. They need someone who won't break. Mara had stared back. Everyone breaks. They need someone who finds it funny when they almost do. She had looked at the psych evaluation attached to the brief, her own file, marked in 3 places with the notation, subject demonstrates anomalous stress response. Laughter under extreme duress. Non-pathological. Classified as adaptive. She had laughed at that, too. Stage 5 was the isolation chamber. Mara sat in the dark for what the external clock later confirmed was 72 hours. No light. No sound. Recycled air that tasted like nothing. The chamber was designed to strip away every sensory anchor and leave the mind with only itself. Most species began hallucinating within 6 hours. Most humans, too. Mara hallucinated on hour 14. She saw her mother's kitchen, bright and yellow, the smell of coffee so real she instinctively reached for a mug that wasn't there. She saw her field camp on Europa, the blue-black ice, the drill tower, her colleague laughing about something she couldn't remember. She saw a version of herself as a child, sitting at a desk, watching rain on a window. She watched the hallucinations the way she watched specimens under glass. Interesting. There's the hippocampal nostalgia loop. There's the threat assessment center compensating for sensory deprivation with familiar memory reconstruction. Classic. On hour 39, the hallucinations turned dark. She saw things dying. She saw failure. She sat with that for a while, too. It wasn't pleasant. But it was familiar. Every scientist who had ever watched an experiment fail knew this particular flavor of darkness. The trick was not to pretend it wasn't happening. The trick was to keep sitting. On hour 61, there was nothing left. No hallucinations. Just Mara, in the dark, breathing, thinking about the pressure differential dynamics of deep-sea hydrothermal vents, because that was simply what her brain defaulted to when unoccupied. On hour 72, the door opened. Mara stood up, stretched her back, and walked out. The conclave's medical team rushed toward her with scanning equipment and concerned chirping. She waved them off politely. "I'm fine," she said. "Is there coffee anywhere on this station?" Admiral Vera watched the final stage from the same observation deck where he had watched Stage 4. Stage 7, the threshold. It was, as far as anyone knew, purely theoretical. No delegate had ever reached it. The founders had described it in the oldest texts as the moment where the candidate confronts the totality of what they are being asked to carry. In practice, it meant sitting alone in a room with a projection of every species in the conclave, all 47, simultaneously transmitting their most urgent crises, their wars, their plagues, their dying stars, their grief, all at once, in real time. The intent was to simulate the psychological weight of the apex representative's function. The founders had assumed it would be impossible to bear. Mara sat in the chair. The projections began. Vera watched her from above. He watched her expression change, not to blankness, not to shutdown, but to something he couldn't immediately name. Her jaw tightened. Her hands, resting on her knees, curled slightly and then deliberately relaxed. Her eyes moved across the projections with the rapid, systematic focus of someone building a mental inventory. She was cataloging it. Not retreating from the weight of it. Not being crushed by it. She was sorting it, prioritizing it, the way Vera realized slowly, a field scientist sorted incoming data from a chaotic environment. Not by eliminating the chaos. By working within it. After 40 minutes, the projection cycle ended. The chamber was quiet. Mara sat still for a moment. Then she covered her face with both hands. Vera tensed, but her shoulders were shaking not with weeping but with the suppressed, helpless laughter of someone who has just processed something too large for any other response. She dropped her hands. Her eyes were bright. "Okay," she said to no one in particular. "Okay. That's a lot." She stood up. The conclave chamber held its breath as Mara Ellison walked to the center floor. 300 delegates. 47 species. All watching a small human woman with dirt under her fingernails and laugh lines around her eyes. Counselor Thyrak descended the delegate steps to stand before her. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of 10,000 years of Velhari tradition. "Delegate Ellison. You have completed the gauntlet." "I noticed," she said. A sound went through the chamber. Not quite laughter. Not quite shock. Something in between. "Do you understand what this means? What you are being asked to carry?" Mara looked out at the assembled species, crystalline and gaseous and tentacled and vast and tiny, so many shapes of life, each improbable, each fragile in their own way, each carrying their own impossible weight. "Yeah," she said. "I do." "Are you afraid?" She considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "A little. But fear's pretty normal for anything worth doing." She paused. "My species figured that out the hard way. On a very dangerous planet. For a very long time. Admiral Vera, standing at the back of the chamber, felt something unlock in his chest that he hadn't known was closed. Thyrak was quiet for a long moment. Then his upper arms uncrossed, a gesture Vera had never seen from him in 40 years of service. It was, he knew, the Velhari posture of surrender to something greater. Then the seat, said Thyrak, is yours. The chamber erupted. Mara Ellison stood in the center of it all, blinking once, twice. Then she looked up at the observation deck, directly at Vera, though she couldn't have known who he was, and she smiled the way someone smiles when a field reading comes back exactly as predicted. Not surprised. Just satisfied. Later, Vera would be asked by 17 different delegates why he thought humans had succeeded where every other species had failed for 10,000 years. He always gave the same answer. Because they come from a planet that tried to kill them every single day, he said, and they never stopped finding that interesting.